The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. Politicians around the world cite its work to support their historical claims. But how did this panel come into being, and how objective is its science?
The Nobel Peace Prize for 2007 is to be shared between the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change and Al Gore Jr. for their efforts to build up and disseminate greater knowledge about man-made climate change.
The International Panel on Climate Change, known as the IPCC, founded by the United Nations in 1988. Now, its findings have been used to justify some of the most extreme claims about global warming. But how did this group become so influential? Contrary to its portrayals in the mainstream media, the IPCC conducts no scientific research. Rather, it was founded to promote international climate agreements.
It was chartered to support a possible future climate treaty. So that's what they do.
To understand the radical approach of the IPCC, all you need to do is look at its inspiration, the controversial UN bureaucrat Sir Maurice Strong.
Mr. Strong, what do you want to achieve in this trip?
It all began in the mind of one ambitious, very rich civil servant who was one of the faction of the UN that has always hoped that the UN could eventually be turned into a world government.
Inspired by a vision of the UN running the world, Strong viewed democracy as an obstacle. He argued that, quote, our concepts of ballot box democracy may need to be modified to produce strong governments capable of making difficult decisions, particularly in terms of safeguarding the global environment. Using a global warming platform, Strong tried to force nations to give up their sovereignty. He went on to propose a global tax on the use of oceans, the atmosphere, and outer space.
The problem is that if you really take global warming as something that you have to stop right now, that gives you entree into virtually every aspect of a person's life.
With the IPCC's philosophy rooted in such radicalism, it is no surprise that the group has stopped at nothing to sell its agenda.
The evidence is now overwhelming that the world would benefit greatly from early action, and that delay would only lead to costs in economic and human terms that would become progressively high.
The panel claims to reflect the beliefs of a so-called scientific consensus.
The notion of science by authority is kind of stupid and counter to science as it's supposed to be conducted. Only the politicians want science as a source of authority.
The IPCC sells its agenda through assessment reports. Now, these reports push for international treaties to curb emissions by painting a picture of environmental Armageddon. The group issued reports in 1990, 1995, 2001, and 2007, and a fifth report is underway. But critics object to how these reports are compiled.
The scientists who are the lead authors on the IPCC are nominated by their governments. And so, therefore, the governments say that this represents science as we see it.
Once the authors are chosen, they survey the scientific literature and claim to reflect it in their reports.
They cherry-pick literature conclusions. They extend their window for what literature is acceptable for consideration if there's a paper that they think helps, and they ignore papers that don't.
Patrick Michaels experienced the IPCC's bias firsthand.
They initially said that they would keep a paper of mine out, even if they had to redefine what the peer-reviewed literature was. So they were bound and determined to have a point of view come through, and they succeeded.
The IPCC's reputation has also come under fire for a series of errors contained in its reports.
The interesting thing about those errors is that they all point in the same direction, towards creating a problem where there isn't one, and towards prodigiously exaggerating it where there is.
This is a graph used in the IPCC's first and second assessment reports. It shows what scientists refer to as the medieval warm period, during which temperatures were as high or higher than they are today. Now, if true, this casts doubt on the idea that humans cause global warming. Shockingly, the medieval warm period was removed from this graph, which became the iconic image of the panel's 2001 report.
Instead of a big bump in the medieval period, as there had been in the 1990 report of the IPCC, and then much lower temperatures ever since, They straightened out the bump, and they produced a huge increase in temperature in the 20th century.
Even more troubling was a finding in the IPCC's first assessment report that the warming we have witnessed over the past few decades could, quote, be largely due to natural variability. The scientists who contributed to the second assessment report came to a similar conclusion.
Now, the UN's bureaucrats realized that if a second report came out saying actually there's no discernible link between human activities and climate change, then people would begin to say, why are we paying for all these junketings around the world every 3 months?
When the second assessment report was published in 1995, all of the uncertainty about how much humans have actually contributed to global warming was removed.
The copy that came out after peer review was stopped said, the balance of evidence suggests there's a discernible human influence on global climate. It was changed after the peer review process.
Errors in the IPCC's most recent report, published in 2007, seem almost amateurish.
The 2007 IPCC report said, among other things, that all the ice in the Himalayas, all the glaciers, would be gone within 25 years of today. The lead author of that chapter knew that that figure was incorrect. They didn't mean 2035, they meant 2350, and even then, it's not going to be gone by then either, but that's what they said.
Among the sources cited in the latest IPCC report, a student thesis, an environmental pressure group's press release, and a feature article in a popular climbers magazine. The head of the IPCC, Rajendra Pachauri, refuses to apologize for the report's numerous errors.
I have no intentions of resigning from my position. I was elected by acclamation by all the countries of the world, and I have a task.
Hopefully Mr. Pachauri and his group take things more seriously as the IPCC prepares its next report due out in 2014.